many of you know, I wrote a book that was published last year. Simon and Schuster distributes it. Skyhorse Publishing, available on Amazon, doing pretty well on Amazon, called Bitcoin Supercycle. And I chose that name. Well, I wrote the book really for three reasons. Number one, I was frustrated that so many um, intelligent investors that I knew in other asset classes, startups, tech stocks, gold and silver, real estate. I would tell them about Bitcoin when it was $60, $100, $200, $500, $2,000, $5,000, particularly at times when I thought that the market had tanked and it was going to come back. And they say, oh, that sounds really interesting. I'll ask my stockbroker about it. And of course, you know where that went. And of course, now if you ask your stockbroker, they say, I have an ETF to sell you. And they're gonna be very happy to say, it's now safe to go and buy Bitcoin now that it's over $100,000 and I get a commission, as opposed to it was like scary, drug prostitution money when it was $60. Yet it's the same Bitcoin, right? And so I'm going to talk a little bit about, the Bitcoin super cycle, my theories on this. I originally wanted to call the book The Four Seasons of Bitcoin because that's a big part of my narrative. Satoshi in the white paper said quite clearly that as long as the amount of new Bitcoin every 4 years bought exceeds the amount mined, the price has to go up. Simple supply and demand. And why the wild volatility? Because in between the halving dates, if you look at the halving dates, which has been so far neither overbought nor oversold, I call it the Goldilocks price of Bitcoin. It's gone up every time. $12.70 at the first halving, $670 at the second halving, $8,700 at the third halving, and $63,900 at the fourth halving last year. Why so much volatility in between? Fear and greed. So I've identified that going all the way back to 2015, sort of four discrete quadrants within each cycle that I call the four seasons. So we'll roll on this now. So again, why Bitcoin is going to massively outperform gold stocks, private equity, venture capital, and real estate. What is Bitcoin and why should you care? I think in this audience, I can probably speed past that a little bit. But, it's the best performing asset class in history, 200% gains per year last 12 years, 100x increase since 2017. Way more than that if you go back to 2013. It's still in its infancy compared with gold. That's actually an old side. I think it's 28 trillion now, just in the last couple of weeks since I did a similar presentation in Switzerland. And, in the last 18 months, Bitcoin ETFs passed 150 billion versus 275 for gold. Okay, picture's worth 1,000 words, and this one only is up to the halving. But you can see, obviously, the cycles. It goes in peaks, it goes down, it goes in peaks, it goes up, down, it goes up in peaks. I probably should have put up the rainbow chart, which actually shows how it peaks the same time every 4 years, and it goes through the lows the same time. And again, very consistent with my 4 seasons of Bitcoin. So Bitcoin, it's a freedom asset. You all know about banks. Not a freedom asset. It's your money, and you have to have permission to use it. And they won't let you have an account most places in the world, and they'll freeze your money if they mismanage it. Right? Bank runs. I think we have another scare right now on the regional banks. It's interesting that the price went down on regional banks because last time when they actually closed down the regional banks, they were dealing with Bitcoin. The price went up because they're like, where else are you going to put your money? Oh, let me keep it in Bitcoin. And obviously they pay near zero interest and are only accessible during bankers' hours. Bitcoin, of course, 24/7. Freedom to transact anywhere in the world, anytime between two willing parties. Okay, so how did Bitcoin start? It's in my book. I do have a chapter on the cypherpunk, and of course, we have the original cypherpunk David Chaum right here. He'll be coming up later. David, the king of kings for cypherpunks, and so I have a whole chapter, and obviously cryptography has been around for centuries. Public key cryptography started in the 70s and 80s. Ralph Merkle, Phil Zimmerman, RSA. David, of course, who invented the concept and the word cryptocurrency when he finished up his PhD at Berkeley in the early 80s. And the cypherpunks described a world where encryption guarded personal privacy, really separated money from state the way that gold had for centuries before. And Waides and Nick Szabo, how Finney all developed to the key developments until Satoshi came out with the white paper. And we're coming up this Halloween will be the 17th anniversary of the Bitcoin white paper. So blockchain versus Bitcoin versus crypto, just a sort of blockchain was Satoshi's concept, right? I mean, there were some things that beforehand that had identified how some things might happen earlier on, but some of the early AT&T Bell Labs stuff, but really the blockchain was described in the white paper and everything since then. I loved it when years ago people like even Mark Cuban, before he, kind of went all in different aspects like NFTs and crypto, said, "Well, I don't know about Bitcoin, but I like the blockchain," meaning the private blockchain. To me, the private blockchain is sort of like what the intranet was to the internet. If you remember in the 90s, people were like, "Well, I don't know, the internet's kind of scary, but like I'm happy to develop my own." Yeah, try and get all the programmers to keep up with the internet. Same thing with the blockchain. So again, Bitcoin is open source code. Everything is sort of developed after Bitcoin. We've gone now to proof of stake for the majority of coins. And then crypto are the public blockchains. Anyone can create a public blockchain. Coin created $70 billion in less than 36 hours. We're now getting close to some clarity where we're able to differentiate what's a commodity, what's a security, and what's a collectible. So, when to invest in Bitcoin? I seem to be one of the few folks that's saying, don't hold forever. It's not too bad, but buy low, sell high, like many other markets. The Bitcoin cycles have been remarkably consistent and predictable, but they're 4-year cycles, unlike the 10-year cycles in the stock market and the varying cycles in real estate, sometimes as long as 14 years. Okay, so the 4 C's of Bitcoin. Here's the juicy stuff, and it's in my book. Bitcoin spring is when the seed of the new cycle is planted. Bitcoin summer is when the Bitcoin price grows parabolically. Bitcoin fall is when the prices fall. And Bitcoin winter is the long road back to the top. That's the longest season. So we're going to break these down. Bitcoin spring, that's the year of the Bitcoin halving. I like to say it's when the seed of the new cycle is planted. And in one day, and you can always tell when Bitcoin spring is coming, it's the day of the halving, every 210,000 blocks. We know the next one in 2028 is going to be roughly late March. It could be a week early, a week late. But you can tell just by looking at the block production, and it's usually roughly every 4 years. It's actually averaged 46 months, lately 47 months. We had 2016 was much less because you had a disruption in the mining space because of China shutting down so many miners. But they've so far been in presidential years, and I think that was not an accident. I think Satoshi planned it that way. And Bitcoin price is also, as I mentioned, at the fair market value. And what's interesting is that in one day, when the halving happens, your Bitcoin miners go from being maybe 10 to 20% of their lucky profitable to almost all of them being unprofitable. If you were making 10% profit, one day later, you have the same costs and you only get half the rewards, you're losing 40%. And so miners have to make a choice. A lot of them will go and, switch out their rigs and say, okay, I'm not going to be making any money right now. Maybe they turn it off. Maybe they kind of keep it going and just figure that they'll make it up later. But basically you would think that the price would drop, except for every Bitcoin that is sold during this period, somebody else is willing to buy because they look and say, oh, every halving cycle has gone up and it just dropped in price. I should buy some. But they don't buy in great volume until you have new price discovery. And that is the first day of Bitcoin summer. So Bitcoin summer, also easy to predict. You can look at the calendar for the day of Bitcoin spring. You can look at math for Bitcoin summer. The day that you're 1 penny above the all-time high from the last cycle, that's the day of Bitcoin summer. And that's sort of my IP that I define it that way. But so far, 4 times out of 4, the day that you go 1 penny above the last cycle's all-time high, kick off like a rocket ship. That's a great day to buy Bitcoin because on a daily IRR basis, this last time when it hit 73,850, I projected in my book that was finished several months beforehand that if Trump won, we would end up hitting the all-time high in early November. And if Kamala won, we'd still get it in 2024, but it would be in late December. Well, we don't know what happened if Kamala won because she didn't, but Trump won, and literally early November on election day, we hit the all-time high. Within 3 weeks, we were over 100,000. And since then, we've been pretty flat. We've been up to 129, down to 75. And people are then saying, well, it's over with, end of cycles, etc. Every single time you've had some pump at the end of the cycle. Some have been rapid and breathless, other have been kind of slow, like you had in 2021. But it has always ended with some FOMO and the bubble popping. And I don't see this time being any different, even though we had a pullback. We literally have never been above 70% fear and greed on the greed side. That was for one day when we hit the last all-time high of like almost 126K. And then when it dropped because of a Trump tweet, we literally have been around 28, almost extreme fear. That's bear market numbers, and people are panic selling. That shakes out the newbies. It's part of the system. And it's interesting that both of the shakeouts have happened near the options expiration. We track this stuff internally. I have a team that we've developed a hedge fund around these strategies. And so the seed of parabolic growth and the Bitcoin price always increases rapidly. After that, 2012 to 13, it went up 100x from having to high. 2016, 17, it went up 30x. 2021, it went up 7.8x. It should have been 10x because, again, it was 3,000x before the halving, then 100, then 30. Just from the diminishing returns, I was projecting 10x, but we had bad macro. We had Biden's war on crypto, Elizabeth Warren's anti-crypto army. We had rapid rise of interest rates. Yet, almost 8x. I think most asset classes would have been really happy with 8x. If gold had gone from 2,000 to like 16,000, I think they'd be pretty giddy. But for crypto, this seemed disappointing. And so my projection for quite some time now has been 3x the halving price, which will take us to 193,000, which most people look at me and saying, oh, we're at 105 today. We only got 2 months left of the halving. You're smoking crack. I still believe we're going to have a run up. I think it may be on the low side because right now it seems like, despite all the promise of the Trump administration, the fact that with one tweet he can drive the market down and seems to do it at will, I think still indicates more bad macro at this point in the cycle than good macro. But we'll see. I do believe that worst case, we're going to be in the 150s. Best case, we'll get over 200, which again, since we're at 105, 106 today, that's not too bad. 107. Okay, so Bitcoin falls where you make all your money if you're not just buying and holding. And I've given an example before. If you bought 1,000 Bitcoin at the first halving and just held it, did nothing else, your $12,700 investment would be today worth about 107 million. Pretty damn good. On the other hand, if you went and sold within 20% of the top, and the first cycle is the hardest one to determine, bought back within 20% of the bottom, every cycle that 12,700 would be worth a little over $6 billion because you'd have 60,000 Bitcoin by buying more Bitcoin at the bottom than you sold at the top. So all the money using my strategy is made by accurate prediction of the start date of Bitcoin fall, which is when the bubble pops, and the end date, which is when you have capitulation. And I believe that one's easier to determine. And so the best strategy is, depending on your tax situation, sell nearly everything at or near the top and knowing you can buy back later. A lot of people are like, oh, I'm never going to guess right. And then they're crying when they're down 2/3. You can also make some profits along the way by shorting, cash and carry. This is what I'm doing in my fund. And okay, let's see. Bitcoin winter is the longest season. So historically, Bitcoin spring has been the shortest season. You think after Bitcoin winter, you're never going to have a spring again, but Bitcoin spring, till it gets to the all-time high, has only been 4 to 7 months, getting a little longer each time. Bitcoin summer has been 9 to 11 months. We've already passed the 11 months. So it's going to be, I think, 12 or 13 months, unless you believe Raoul Paul, then it'll be like 2 years or whatever. And then it's the longest. But then again, when it crashes, all the media is saying it's going to zero. That's the best time to buy because, all the sellers are gone. And it's the longest season, but it's the only one getting shorter. Bitcoin fall, interesting enough, is not getting longer or shorter. It's always been about a year. In 21, it was exactly 1 year. November 10th was the peak in 21. November 10th in 22 was when FTX happened. And it's not that FTX caused the collapse. The over-leveraging of the greed of the bull cycle caused the collapses that then brought the FTXs and Terra Lunas, et cetera, into a date with reality. And so again, Bitcoin winter getting shorter each time. It's averaged about 18 months. And best strategy is buy all the Bitcoin you can afford at the end of Bitcoin fall, which is the start of Bitcoin winter, and you're still doing pretty good buying throughout the winter with new money that you have to invest. Okay. The only time you don't want to be dollar cost averaging is during Bitcoin fall because it's just buying into lower lows. Okay, let's see. Cycle strategies. I sort of just kind of mentioned those. Buy all the Bitcoin you can afford. At the end of summer, be patient. And again, really hold. My strategy is hold Bitcoin for 3 years and cash for one. And the Bitcoin super cycle part of this is the diminishing returns will not last forever because we've had 100x, then 30x, then, you know, not quite 10x, and maybe now not quite 3x. If you keep on going that, how are you ever going to get to $10 million Bitcoin? So, or even $1 million Bitcoin. And the way you do that is right now, only 4%. Let's see if I have a slide in this. I can't remember. Hello, hello. Nope, I don't. Okay, well, I'm going to just talk over this then. The Bitcoin super cycle is when you have the S curve of adoption that happens with every new technology, internet, mobile phones, color TVs, where all of a sudden you go from the early crazy, early adopters to the early mainstream. This is talked about by Jeffrey Moore in Crossing the Chasm, Inside the Tornado. It's part of the Gartner hype cycle. They're all variations on the theme of the S curve of adoption. That it takes forever for sort of like something to get off the ground, but then when you get about maybe 6-7% of the population, it's a very rapid race to like 70 or 80%. And we're at that point or getting pretty close to it in Bitcoin. Right now, we only have 4% of the world. About 7 or 8% has any crypto, but believe it or not, there's people who have Dogecoin and no Bitcoin. We're only between about 4 and 5% by most estimates of the world that has any Bitcoin. And yet we are 95% out of Bitcoin. We will hit 20 million Bitcoin mined in March of next year. We're at like 19.9 something right now. And 19.93, I think I checked yesterday. And so where's that Bitcoin to come from? If we go in 4 years and the next bull market in 2029, we've got 20% of the world owning Bitcoin. Where is that quadruple amount of Bitcoin going to come from? It's not going to come from current supply. I checked last week with some of my sources, and across all of the exchanges in the world, there was only 170,000 Bitcoin for sale. And yet the Trump administration right now with Cynthia Lummis bill, which if they want to jam it through the Senate and House, they can, says that they're going to buy 200,000 Bitcoin a year for the next 5 years. Again, that's more than the total supply in the world, and they're not the only ones buying it. MicroStrategy is buying it, retail is buying it. And so let's see. You can buy my book. This is the Amazon code, and I do have some here as well that I can sell and sign. And I also have a fund, which not really going to talk to an audience that's got people that I don't know personally, but I can talk to you if you know me or are introduced to me because it's kind of for. It's not something I'm publicly advertising, but it is out, and we're using the strategies of the book. So that's it. Thank you so much.